Is that the House to now adjourn, and I call the honourable member for Hinkler.
Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on an issue of great concern in my electorate of Hinkler. The situation confronting cane growers is dire. The region has endured 2 major floods in 3 years and is now in the midst of the worst drought in more than 2 decades. The impact of these natural disasters on the local economy is significant. There are 600 cane farms across the region, which employ about 800 people and generate $230 million a year for the local economy. This doesn't include the thousands of people indirectly employed by the sector and those working in sugar mills. I recently met with ISIS cane growers and local Chamber of Commerce representatives at Childers, who told me that farms and businesses are on the brink of collapse. One grower at the meeting described his predicament as a death spiral. Growers are actively discouraging their children from pursuing careers in agriculture. Banks are threatening to foreclose, and people in the sugar industry have no money to spend, which means other Childers businesses are also feeling the pinch. Now, this has been the ISIS region's highest water usage season since 1991. They are currently 100% reliant on irrigation. The cost and the man-hours required to irrigate and keep their crop alive is taking its toll. To remain viable would require, at the very least, an immediate 33% reduction in electricity and water costs, and this year alone electricity will make up 1/3 of their operational costs. Growers are operating as efficiently as they possibly can. Previously, they irrigated at night to utilise cheaper tariffs, while minimising evaporation. Now, the night tariff has increased to such an extent that it is no longer financially beneficial to irrigate at night. We need to give them an incentive to irrigate at night so we are maximising the utilisation of our generating assets. Despite using only centre-pivot low-pressure irrigation, which is one of the most efficient methods of irrigation known, one grower said his electricity bill for last quarter was $135,000, plus $44,000 in water charges. Now, there aren't too many cane growers that make $200,000 in a year, let alone almost $200,000 in a quarter. ISIS growers expect to produce just 840,000 tonnes of cane in the 2014 season. Now, that is compared to 1.5 million tonne in 2012. Now, some have chosen to simply turn the tap off altogether and call it quits. They say they simply cannot afford to absorb the annual prices set by the Queensland Competition Authority and the Australian Energy Regulator. If the Newman government accepts the QCA's recommended 16.3% increase in 2014-15, tariffs 62, 65 and 66 will have increased by 96% since 2009. The network or end component, which is set by the AER and passed on by the QCA, represents about half of the current electricity price. Now, over the decades, Madam Speaker, we have invested billions of dollars in water infrastructure in a bid to improve industry's viability. Now, what was the point? If we are now charging growers so much for electricity they can't afford to use any of it, you shouldn't have to rely on your prayers to be successful in agriculture. So what are we doing about it? Well, repealing the carbon tax will wipe around 10% off their electricity bill. But growers argue such a reduction will not nearly be enough, and they fear the 10% will simply be eaten up by future tariff increases. And unfortunately, Labor in the Senate is standing in the way of the growers at least getting some relief. In February, we announced we would review the renewable energy target to determine its impact on carbon emissions, energy markets and prices, businesses and Australian households. Now, in government, Labor's red of 20% created an excess of solar users across the country without any consideration of need, market conditions or existing generation capacity. Now, what people don't realise is it's not the government subsidising solar users, it's electricity users. So, in other words, the people who can't afford to install solar are subsidising those who can. Now, there isn't enough time today to detail all of these factors, but basically electricity users are paying between $30 and $40 million per productive megawatt, plus a further 40 to 65 cents per kilowatt hour for other people to have solar. Now, my constituents installed this in good faith, and we should honour those contracts. But repealing the carbon tax and reviewing the RET is a good start, but it's not enough. Now, we are working with the Council of Australian Governments for reforms to place downward pressure on energy prices. An energy white paper will look at a regulatory reform and set out a coherent and integrated approach to energy policy. But to the cane growers in my electorate, I know you are exhausted. I know you feel your concerns have gone unheard for too long. But please make a submission to that white paper, because no Aussie farms means no Aussie food. and as a former cane farmer and a registered professional electrical engineer in Queensland, I'm not sure that's an Australian I want to live in. Thank you.
The question is that the House do now adjourn. I call the member for